All right. Hello, everybody. This is the NBA Tournament Strategy Show where we do a quick look back at yesterday, see how that went. Not so well for me. And then we'll talk about this slate. And guys, we want to get leverage on, talk about the pre-lock show, which will be at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time for VIP members only. To become that, click the link in the description. Feel free to use the promo code BOB for a 10% discount. And then, you know, we'll go from there. Hope everyone's doing well. Good to see you, Dave. Good morning. It is a good morning. Alex said, no, it's not. Lillard cost me multiple takedowns. Yeah, Lillard freaking sucked yesterday. Speaking of, let's look at the winning lineup from last night. This line won $100,000 last night. And the line was solid. Was a solid line. I don't think there were any crazy surprises. Personally, I was really excited to not see TJ Warren on here. TJ Warren was talked about by the one and only Godzilla on the NBA pre-lock show yesterday, and I was like, yeah, I'm not really that high on him. I was like, you can play him, but I'm not really excited about the play. And I did mention, I was like, I do think if he does go off, I doubt he'll make the 100K lineup just because he'll be so low owned, and that happened. So no regrets. I did have Paul George as a leverage play. That went well. Kyle Lowry, that made sense. I was not super high on Josh Hart. I took the Damian Lillard, Simons, Nurkic route. And those two did not pan out. It was Hart, Grant, and Nurkic. So the reverse side of it. Oddly enough, Darius Garland isn't in this lineup either, which was surprising because I wasn't on him either. And so I honestly thought that not having Warren and Garland were the main reasons why I didn't have a super successful night. But I think it was mostly because maybe I didn't have Kevin Porter exposure, or maybe I just wasn't heavy enough on some of these guys. It was a weird one, not one that I'm really going to overthink. Sometimes things just don't work out. We did have quite a few members, though, have like top 20 lines, top 100 lines. So there are people who definitely did have a lot of success, just not me. Kaboom said Warren was money, definitely. He was, but he wasn't in the 100K line. So I'm okay missing it. Like, I'm okay missing those. Like, those weird plays that don't make the 100K lineup. I'm like, all right, guys, have fun with it. Have fun with it. All right, guys, moving on to today's slate. Let's try to get some positive vibes going, some new energy. It's a new day. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. Starting off with this Lakers against the Orlando Magic's game is pretty interesting. We have LeBron James probable, Dennis Schroeder's probable, AD's out. He's been out. Juan Toscano's out. On the Magic side of things, Jalen Suggs is out. Okiki's still out. Jonathan Isaac is out. But the thing is, like, the Magic, they're getting healthier. They're getting healthier and healthier and healthier. And so that's making a lot of these guys that we've loved playing less interesting. But today, they have a super soft matchup against a not so great Lakers team. I think there are some viable Magic plays today. The Lakers have allowed the most points per game and the second most made 3-point games without second most made 3-point shots per game with Anthony Davis sidelined. So with that being said, I think guys like Franz Wagner are interesting here. Paolo Banchero's viable, Cole Anthony. These are guys that make a ton and shoot a ton of threes, so they're just more interesting in this spot than they typically would be. Looks like Cole Anthony is going to be relatively popular on this slate. That's not going to scare me off of him, but definitely something that I want to keep track of. If it gets too crazy, a little bit of a risky play, so not one that I want to have a core, not a play that I want to be like a core player or anything like that on a slate like this. LeBron James is in a nice spot here. I like the spot for LeBron James. He's priced appropriately, so we're not getting him at an extreme value. AD is still out. This is a nice matchup against the Magic. I think he's definitely viable. I definitely want him in lineups today because I like his upside here. I don't think he'll be a leverage play for me. I think it'll really just depend on how much exposure I get to him naturally, but it's definitely an interesting spot. Thomas Bryant, man, I feel like there's been something every time we play this guy. This is a nice spot for him. It makes sense. I'll have some exposure because it's a logical play, but man, I really don't want to get burned again here. I really do not want to. Russell Westbrook, definitely still viable. He has upside. He's priced well and appropriately here, even given the matchup. So not my favorite play on the board, but viable. Lonnie Walker, 3-point shot was definitely falling on the last slate. That one made sense for me. Like that last game he did well in, I was on. I think that Sunday. I don't know. Probably. Maybe Saturday. Because the team they were facing just weren't great against forwards. It was with DFS out, it was the Mavericks. And so that spot made a ton of sense. This spot isn't my favorite for Lonnie Walker, so I don't think I'm going to take the shot on him here. Austin Reeves has been improving over the last few games. He now has an 18.8% usage rate, whereas previously he had a 12.5% usage rate. So Davis being out is helping him. It's definitely making him more viable, but he's priced up and not really a spot that I feel like we have to target, but viable. All right, moving on. We spent way too much time on that game. There's some interesting spots, but there's a 10-game slate. We have to move. Probably one of my favorite sneaky high-end plays today is Joel Embiid. Washington has they allow a ton of rebounds, and Embiid is up there with the best of them when it comes to bigs. Tattooed Freak, good to see you, man. Good to see you in here. But yeah, Joel Embiid at 6% ownership is a play that I like a lot in this spot. James Harden is viable. I'll be honest with you guys. Christmas Day NBA slate is historically just my worst slate. Like I rarely do well on Christmas. And part of it is my own fault because I just refuse to play chalky James Harden on Christmas. And so whenever I get past that, I'll probably start winning on Christmas. But James Harden's fine in this spot. Maxey is still out. If you want to take your last few shots on these guys while you still can with Maxey out, because it looks like Maxey's probably going to return on Friday or here soon, Embiid and Harden will still be plenty viable. We've seen them have explosive games with Maxey in, but I prefer to play them while he's out. So for me, I'm going to choose Embiid here, but I think Harden's just as viable. Let's see. Anything else interesting about this Sixers team? Harris and Melton have been solid as of late. Not guys I'm going to try to prioritize on this slate, but they're viable. Porzingis, he's been a little bit everywhere from like a scoring standpoint. He's had some explosive games. He's been kind of questionable and out a little bit too. So it's a little tough. I don't love the matchup against Embiid, so he's not a guy that I'm excited to play in this spot. But I understand getting some Porzingis exposure from like a GPP standpoint at super low ownership and only at 8,800. I don't hate it. Of course, Kuzma and Beal have been doing well, but again, the Sixers are a solid defensive team, not one that I like to target. So unless there's some crazy injury news, we have Denny Avdija questionable. Will Barton appears to be healthy and fine. So unless there's any crazy injury news, I'm not really loving this spot for the Wizards today. Next up, we have the Rockets against the Boston Celtics. That spread is pretty wide. There's a 14.5-point spread in the Celtics' favor. So I guess there's some blowout risk. Not something that I try to think about or overthink too much. We saw last night, like sometimes these teams randomly stay close, even in matchups that they shouldn't be winning. Sometimes they do blow out. So just something that I just don't try to overthink too often, because at the end of the day, hopefully it stays close. For me, KPJ went off. He was the missing piece for me last night. You can chase it if you want to. I'm not going to. 7,300, tough matchup. He's going to be low owned once again, so it doesn't look like people are going to chase him too much. I think Jalen Green at 6,700 slightly more interesting. But again, like with Eric Gordon, well, it looks like Eric Gordon's unlikely to play, so that's makes things slightly more interesting. We've seen Jabari Smith and Jalen Green have better performances with Eric Gordon being out. So I think that does make Jabari Smith Jr. more viable. Jalen Green's more viable. And then Shunyan is just popping in general. Like, it looks like he's going to be pretty popular on this slate. People like him in this spot, and it's really hard to argue with it. 5,800 is a solid price tag for a guy with his upside and seeing his minutes. So as long as those minutes are there and this game doesn't blow out, I think he's a fine play. Christopher Y said, I had him in one lineup because of an injury pivot, but that was the only reason. Nice, man. I know, like, sometimes just making those, like, gut pivots sometimes can work out for you. Of course, they can go wrong 9 times out of 10, but That's why I don't like to tell people not to do stuff, because I do crazy stuff all the time and sometimes it works out. Like Saturday for the NFL slate, we were doing a pre-lock show for the NFL. We were just talking about it, and then we were like, CMC is in a really tough spot. And it was a question we got from the chat, and I was like, yeah, I think it makes sense to go under on him in this spot. I don't know if people thought I was joking, but I really did just X amount of my player pool in that moment, and it worked out. So sometimes just doing crazy things like that can pan out, even when some of the sharpest players are telling you not to do it. Whatever. Dave said, what is your GPP core on DraftKings as of right now? Dave, I don't have one, and I'm not going to have one until like 5. There's just absolutely no point in having a core right now at all, just because it's a 10-game slate, and even if it was a smaller game slate, just injury news changes so much. It's not worth the time to think about. What I like to think about early on in this slate is just matchups I like, people I want to keep an eye on, situations I want to maybe dig deeper into on this slate, potential leverage plays, things of that sort. Core plays are just so volatile depending on injury news. It's not worth your time, man. It's not worth it. On the other side of this game, the Celtics have a super easy matchup. The hard part is, will this game stay close enough for them to have ceiling performances? And then who is it going to be? Because the Rockets are bad everywhere. I think the easy answer is Tatum. I mean, Tatum has been on an absolute tear as of late. It's going to be hard to not play him in a great matchup. Jaylen Brown's always the guy who gets overlooked. I don't love paying up for Jaylen Brown at 9,200, but he's proven time and time again that he's worth the price tag. So hard for me to argue against him in this spot as well. Honestly, Tatum and Brown are potential leverage plays for me if they stay this low owned. It just doesn't make sense for me in this spot, besides the fact that everyone's afraid of the blowout, which is logical. It's just, if a guy's in a good spot and no one else is going to play him, I'll take the shot. Moving on, we have the Clippers against the Toronto Raptors. Now, from an injury news standpoint, it looks like Precious Achiuwa is doubtful. Otto Porter is out. He's been out for a little bit of time now. For the Clippers, it looks like Kawhi is expected to play. John Wall is TBD, but they're playing on a back-to-back, so I would expect them to play. Now, that's Kawhi and John Wall. We have no idea what the Clippers will choose to do with the guys who played yesterday. Like Paul George, will he play? He's not on the injury report right now, but the Clippers like to get a little wild on these back-to-backs. So I wouldn't be shocked if we see some guys sitting from this team, which is really the only way I would be interested in playing the Clippers tonight. I don't like picking on the Raptors too much from an offensive standpoint. They're a pretty good defense. And then with that being said, if everyone's healthy on this Clippers team, they're all just relatively high usage guys that eat into each other, and it's harder for them to hit their ceiling. Now, Paul George's price did go down to 8,600. So that is interesting, but again, the matchup is tough. I'm only going to be interested in like Paul George or Kawhi if like Paul George, Kawhi, or John Wall are out. Those are the 3 highest usage rates on this team, and I need one of them to be out for me to be excited to play some of these guys. On the other side of this game, we have the Raptors. And again, I don't love picking on the Clippers. They're another solid defensive team. I think you can take your shots on guys that are matchup proof in my mind, or that can at least overcome a tough matchup. Guys like Pascal Siakam, really, really talented player. 10,100 is expensive, but not the craziest price tag on him in this spot. So viable. Fred VanVleet is also just a guy who's in solid form and can overcome a matchup against the Clippers. They've been better against guards as of late, but potential leverage spot, I think. Something I want to dig a little bit deeper into, just because, again, the matchup isn't great, but I don't know. I think it's a little bit of an interesting spot, potentially. Moving on. I don't love this game, if you can't tell. Just some interesting spots. It does look like OG's popping. Probably mostly due to Precious being out and his price. I honestly can't think of a fantastic reason for OG to be popping like this. I'm gonna need to dig a little bit deeper into that. I do get Zubac 4,600. He has a ton of upside. The risky part about Zubac is just his minutes floor and the lack of upside there. You can tell he has like explosive games. We've all seen it. It's just hard to chase that performance consistently because it's not consistent at all. So that's this game for me. Dez said, I hope you had a blessed Christmas, Josiah. Question. I hope you did too, man. Thanks. Do you think this slate can be won tonight without Jokic in my lineup? Short answer is always yes. Because you can always fade anyone. Like there's always a reason or a case to be made for a fade. So I would always say yes to that. But in particular to we can jump to that game. I am personally not going to have a ton of Jokic exposure on the slate. I know he's really popular. So calm down. Like, I know it's going to get a little bit of hate. But I don't force Jokic or Jamal Murray or Michael Porter Jr. or Aaron Gordon when they're all healthy if one of them aren't just super cheap. So, like, for me, Aaron Gordon played more than 30 minutes last slate, but that was due to the overtime game, but whatever. He's playing heavier minutes now, and so I like the floor a little bit, and I feel a little bit more safe with it, and there's a lot of risk involved, but I would rather take a shot on MPJ than spend 11,400 with Jokic when everyone's healthy on this team, and the usage rate is pretty spread out, and Jokic likes to facilitate a lot when the team's like this, so go ahead, man. Thank you for the question, Des. I know you meant well, but you're definitely going to when Jokic goes off tonight. I can't wait to see the hate mail come in. It's gonna be good. Thomas Dye, man. No, you didn't miss a lot. I appreciate you joining, man. Appreciate you joining. You just kind of the only thing you missed was me making a pretty bold statement on fading Jokic when he's chalky with everyone healthy. So I'm sure that's gonna go well. I don't think that's going to change either. I mean, it's possible I'll do more research and fall in love with the spot. I know the Kings aren't great defensively, but I don't know. I don't love that spot. Next up, we have the Hawks against the Pacers. Let's see. Injury news. For the Hawks, we have Clint Capella still out. DeAndre Hunter is questionable. Jarrett Culver's out. And then Vitt is questionable. The Pacers on the other side of this, a back-to-back game for them. They disappointed a lot of people yesterday. I like Tyrese Halliburton's upside. He's matchup proof at this point. He's proven that to me, but he can also have some pretty bad games too. Oddly enough, again, I feel like I say this a lot. I don't play a ton of guards against the Hawks these days, but with that being said, I do kind of like Halliburton here. I know he burnt a lot of people yesterday, so I kind of like going back to the guy that hurt people yesterday because he'll be lower owned. Miles Turner is very interesting here. The Hawks have not been a great rebounding team, and they've also just been bad against bigs in general as of late. So nice spot for him as well. This is a game that I foresee like having a lot of exposure to, or at least a decent amount of exposure to. Okongwu has proven that he's viable in this spot. John Collins is just a weirdo on this team. Like, he just does not fit the mold. But he's viable. I think they're going to try to trade him here soon. So they'll probably try to keep trying to show him off some and show what he can do. So it's a weird matchup because both of these teams aren't great teams at defending bigs. So it's weird. Keith, the Hawks they're decent, but Trae Young has been a little bit everywhere. There's a lot of internal drama going on from what I've heard. So I don't know. I don't have as much faith in this team as a lot of people do. But I do. If I had to pick between Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, I usually just let the domination station kind of control my fate there. But I do kind of like DeJounte Murray in this spot. But it's weird. It's better. I like to attack both of these teams with the bigs rather than the guards. But I do think like the upside with some of their star players is interesting. I'm just going to need to dig a little bit deeper into it to feel good about it. So we'll see. We'll talk about it on the pre-luck show. TBD. But the front court, we are attacking. Like Miles Turner, we'll have some exposure. Onyeka will have some exposure. John Collins, I'll probably match the field on, to be honest. So that's that game. 5 more to go. Next up, we have two bad teams facing each other, which is always a good time. We have the Spurs against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Pretty long list for the Thunder. So, water sip. We have Omori out, Lindy Waters is out. These are a lot of G Leaguers. Jalen Williams is out, Ding's out, Jeremiah Robinson Earl's out, and then Holmgren has been out for a while. It's interesting. Like, you guys know my philosophy on the Thunder. Like, we really can't trust these guys outside of SGA, Giddey, and Dort. These are the guys that see consistent minutes. Jalen Williams, allegedly, is starting to look a little bit more consistent. So slightly more viable. I still have trust issues, though. Still have trust issues with Pokusevski as well. I didn't say that right, but it's fine. He's going to pop and be very popular today. He's only 4,300, so I get it. I would love, I'm like praying for a better power forward or center play that's this cheap, because that would be nice. But I don't think we're going to get that because we can't have nice things. So I'll probably match the field on Poku. I don't foresee myself trying to get leverage on him. It's a nice spot, nice matchup, but I just don't trust them anymore. This team is just wild when it comes to their minutes for absolutely no reason. Jess said, do we like Nembhard? Potential upside? Yeah, I mean, when we look at these Pacer guys, of course, like, we have Nesmith and Smith, probable, which, makes me like taking risk on guys like Nembhard and Mathurin less. But they have upside here, and Nembhard's going to be relatively popular, so you're not going to get him in like a sneaky way. Nembhard's not going to be a leverage player or anything like that for me, but more than likely the domination station will like him because he's a decent value on this slate. So I'll probably be around field weight on him. So I don't really talk about guys like that a ton, just so you guys know. Like, they're just kind of lineup fillers for me. I usually kind of pinpoint guys that are like potential leverage plays for me, or guys that are just in interesting spots. But Nembhard's definitely viable, man. So no worries there. Back to the Thunder. We were talking about the trust that I have in them, or lack thereof. But I do like SGA in this spot. The Spurs are an awful team. Giddey's ownership scares me a little bit, 20%. But I get it. It's a very soft matchup. Kind of probably similar to like some of the other plays. I'll probably be around field weight exposure, but it's going to be hard for me to get a lot of leverage on him. I prefer SGA. I don't think that's, I mean, well, I guess that's less popular, but I guess that's probably not a shock. Next up, we have the Spurs. Okay. So yesterday, I unchecked Sachan. And I was kind of worried about it because he's been going off, and I was just kind of sick and tired of seeing him. But now I feel like I kind of erased it. We have like a fresh start. We're starting anew again. And thankfully he didn't go off yesterday, so I didn't feel like I made an awful call there. He's going to be super popular today. Really nice matchup. His minutes have been more consistent as of late, and he's shown some upside. And at 4,100, it's a really tough fade. I am crossing everything that the DS doesn't love him so much that he's going to be a core play. I'm sure he's probably close to that right now, but again, like, I don't really worry about that too much this early. But hopefully we get some news where it's not like we have to play him in these spots. The Spurs don't have any injury news, which is why I was less excited to play him yesterday. We saw Vassell do pretty well yesterday as well. So, I mean, for me, I think the Spurs are just viable on this slate. Like, I like Keldon Johnson. I like Devin Vassell. Sachan I have to like because of his cheap price tag and the minutes he's seeing at this point, but still not my favorite spots. But they make too much sense on this slate to ignore. Even though everything in my body wants to say, like, just uncheck him. I can't. I can't. It just makes too much sense. It would be silly. It would be silly. Logic is beating out the impulses today, which is a good thing. Next up, we have the Suns against the Grizzlies. The Suns have Devin Booker out once again. This is going to be a game that's, I think, is going to go a little bit under-owned because a lot of us are sick of getting burned by the Suns. But Devin Booker's out once again. Shamit is out, which I think is huge. Cam Payne's out. He's been out for a while. Cam Johnson's been out for a while, so no surprises there. We've seen Josh Okogie do well in these spots. he's really one of the only guys, along with Chris Paul, who's seeing any run here from like an ownership standpoint. And so I think both of them are viable. It's weird because we were on a Kogi earlier and back when he was way cheaper. I'll need to see if I feel comfortable trying to get leverage on him. I think he's more of like a just match the field kind of guy. So like if he goes off for matching the field, but he's not going to ruin the slate for us. Whereas Chris Paul is a potential leverage guy. He's seeing the security around minutes. He's not that expensive. He's only 8K. Ayton's usually the guy I would try to get some leverage on here, but the matchup is kind of brutal against the Grizzlies. So I think it's going to be a Chris Paul slate for me. On the other side of this game, we have the Grizzlies. Danny Green's the only guy out. The Grizzlies are pretty healthy right now. The Suns aren't a team that I like to pick on from a offensive standpoint, but Ja Morant's basically matchup proof. I always love the upside that Jaren Jackson Jr. brings, especially now that he's back in the 6Ks, like from a price range standpoint. The matchup is tough, but it's interesting. I'm going to dig into it a little bit, see if JJJ is viable, especially with everyone healthy. Not the best play, but the spot I want to dig into a little bit more. And then Steven Adams is Steven Adams. He's always a lineup filler. Never a guy you want to force too much of. Next up, we have the Knicks against the Mavericks. We have Jalen Brunson questionable. The Mavericks still have DFS out, Dorian Finney-Smith. Kemba Walker's questionable. Nikhil Frank's questionable. Josh Green's out. Maxi Kleber's out. So nothing too crazy. I mean, I think for the Knicks, the biggest thing is going to be Jalen Brunson. The guys who have really been benefiting the most from a usage standpoint with Brunson out is RJ Barrett and Julius Randle. The guys who will see more minutes or a little bit of a boost from a minute standpoint is Emmanuel Quickly and Miles McBride. So we've seen this situation enough times where we pretty much know how to handle the Knicks. The Knicks aren't a team that I love to target against the Mavs. The Mavs played a pretty slow pace. It's harder for the opposing team to hit upside or have high upside games as possible, especially it's slightly easier for bigs. So like Julius Randle, still viable here in my mind, but the other players I'm less excited to play. The Knicks have, they've been improving from a defensive standpoint over the last few weeks. So at least as of right now, the Mavericks aren't my favorite plays, but Luka is always viable. He's always just, he's there. Not my favorite spot for Luka either. Like I prefer to play him in like super fast pace matchups, like against the Hornets or Golden State. But you can play Luka on any slate. I don't think I have to tell you guys that. Next up, we have the Hornets against the Warriors. We have Dennis Smith Jr. TBD, Nick Richards TBD, Cody Martin is out. On the Warriors side of things, we have Andrew Wiggins out. Draymond Green is probable. JaMychal Green is out. Andre Iguodala is out. And then Steph Curry is still out. So not a ton of surprises. We know Jordan Poole's role at this point. He's 8,200. We're not getting a discount on him. Nice spot against the Hornets. The Hornets are bad. I feel like we say this all the time, every day, all day, every day. The Hornets are bad everywhere. They're bad against bigs. They're bad against guards. They're bad against forwards. So we can play pretty much whoever we want to from the Golden State Warriors from a matchup perspective. The next thing we have to look at is how are they priced? Do we think they're too expensive? 8,200 for Jordan Poole that's seeing like the mid 30s in minutes isn't too expensive for me, especially in a nice matchup. And he's only 12% owned. Jordan Poole has been a leverage play for me quite often. I don't think it's panned out too well, but I'm going to do it again. I like the matchup. I like the ownership. And as long as it stays around there, I'm going to get leverage on it. Klay Thompson had a decent game on Christmas. Not my favorite spot to attack. It's just Klay Thompson. Unless I see something as I'm doing research that really makes me feel like this is a spot that he could kind of have a breakout game, probably not going to attack it too much. Draymond's probable. He's viable once again in this spot. He is one of the bigs for the Golden State Warriors, and he's someone that can definitely take advantage of this Hornets team. Next up, we have Kuminga, Looney, and Wiseman. At this point, they're pretty much splitting minutes. The hard part to predict here is that there's been a lot of blowouts for the Warriors, and so Wiseman sees more run in those situations. Looney is probably where I go to attack the Hornets on this slate, but I might just try and mix and max exposures just in case. And then Moody, Ty Jerome, Anthony Lamb, those are your blowout guys as well. So harder to trust, but way more secure than they were previously. If there's a blowout and they see more minutes, they become the nuts. So guys that we need to keep on our radar still. Man, LaMelo didn't crush us yesterday, but he did disappoint us a little bit. The good news is that we're getting him a lot cheaper now. He's no longer in the 10Ks, and I'm okay with going right back to him. Like, yeah, he hurt us a little bit yesterday, but I'm more than happy to go right back to it in a plus spot against the Warriors. So for sure, fine with that. I'm okay with like Terry Rozier as like a pivot off. Well, not really pivot off of LaMelo because Rozier is more popular, but in my mind, Rozier is like a pivot off of Ball because I like Ball more. But anyway, Rozier is a fine play as well. Oubre is viable, but I like Oubre more so when Ball or Rozier's out. The front court isn't my favorite spot right now at this point. They're both priced appropriately, and just not really an exciting play for me on this slate. So for me, it's more so the guards. We talked about the Warriors, and then we have the last game on the slate, guys. We are almost done. Still around 30 minutes on a pretty large slate. The Nuggets, we have KCP listed as probable. Jeff Green is out per usual. Big news here is Domantas Sabonis being questionable for the Kings. If Sabonis ends up being out, I really hope we get that news early because we can look at guys like Me Too, Holmes, Queta, would all see more minutes with Sabonis out. Fox, the Aaron Fox sees a massive boost. You guys already could probably predict what I'm doing from like a leverage play already. Like Fox is going to be a leverage play for me today. The Nuggets have been awful against guards all year long, and we've been making money by playing guards against them. So on occasion, like was it SGA or John Morant? I don't remember. They put Aaron Gordon on their guards against the best guard at times, and we've seen guards struggle a little bit more as of late, but Gordon's not always on the guard, so we've still seen these guards have solid performances. But there's a little bit more risk involved there. Definitely once I started to catch that, but I still like the spot, so going right back to it. Outside of that, I mentioned I'm going to be lower on Jokic. When this team is healthy, he likes to facilitate more, and he's just too expensive to share the ball. He needs to be selfish, and he's not a selfish player. So hard for me to be over the field or have leverage. I might have some exposure. I really think I'm going to be way under, but we'll see on the pre-lock show where we land exactly. Jamal Murray is viable. He's priced well. Solid matchup. Not something I'm afraid of. If he starts to hit the 8K range, then that's when I'm going to jump ship, but I'm fine with him here. Aaron Gordon at 6,600 is a little pricey with his decreasing usage rate with MPJ coming back, but, you know, not my favorite play. I do think MPJ could be interesting. 5,900 is a little bit too cheap to me for his upside, but it's a spot I need to dig deeper into before I, claim that he'll be a leverage play or something. The other side of this game, like I mentioned, like I like Fox a lot, but the other streaky shooters on this team, like, is really anyone's guess. Like Alex Len would be interesting if Sabonis is out. I think when it comes to like Keegan Murray, Harrison Barnes, Kevin Hoyter, those are your streaky shooters that I like to rotate exposure to. Like I don't really try to force it. I like to trust the DS and like, hey, if you want to give me exposure to these guys, give me exposure to them. Now, when there's an injury, like if Hoyter's out or if Barnes is out or if Murray's out, then that's when I start to get more creative and play guys like Monk and Terrence Davis. Like that's when things get more interesting. But when they're all healthy, it's really boring. It looks like Malik Monk is going to carry some ownership. Like I mentioned, he's another streaky shooter. He's not playing a ton of minutes. I really don't understand where the ownership's coming from on him. That might adjust later. Like again, streaky shooter, he has upside. I'm not saying to fade it. I just don't understand it yet. So I'm going to try to dig deeper into it for the slate. But all right, guys, that is this slate in a nutshell. I appreciate you guys for watching and joining and, keeping the conversation going. If you guys could like and subscribe, that would mean a ton for us to keep growing and trying to make sure that we're doing a good job out here. I appreciate the support. And, don't forget to check us out later today at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time for the pre-lock show. Have a good one, guys, and I will see you later. Peace.